introduce our speaker for today, Alan Wheelock. Alan has been in senior management roles in business for many years, including Territory Vice President and Senior Vice President at Iron Mountain. He was right in the thick of Iron Mountain's spectacular growth, from 100 employees to more than 20,000. At present, he is president of Jones River Consulting, which focuses on helping companies to strengthen customer relationships and grow their businesses. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. So, the focus of this presentation is about negotiation. Is there anybody in this room who has not had to negotiate in the last month? Raise your hand. Anybody? The thing about negotiation that I've always believed is this is not just a business skill. This is not something that you do when you're negotiating with a vendor or a contractor or an employee or a boss. You're negotiating all the time, right? If you're not negotiating at work, you might be negotiating with a family member. You could be negotiating with your children. You certainly negotiate with your significant other, right? And by the way, I offer absolutely no advice on negotiating with spouses. If you saw me negotiate with my spouse, you would lose confidence in me. You would say, wow, he can't negotiate. So I've always believed that if you don't learn how to negotiate, you are at a disadvantage. So there's a lot of wonderful, relatively easy things that you can do to learn how to be a better negotiator, and that's what we're going to cover today. One of my favorite quotes about negotiation is from Dean Acheson, who was Secretary of State for Harry Truman. I mean, who negotiates more than a Secretary of State, right? Well, he said, the one sure way to conciliate a tiger is to allow oneself to be devoured. You don't want to get devoured when you're negotiating, right? The pinnacle of good negotiation is not so much to win, but to walk away with a win-win situation. Not a win-lose. A lot of people believe in win-lose. I don't believe in it, and I do not advocate it. I was so blessed in my career with Iron Mountain to have extensive experience in negotiations. I negotiated with every industry you can think of. Huge insurance companies, big banks, law firms, hospitals, real retail chains. Just all these different industries. And you know what kept happening? Even though it was all these different companies and all these different industries, the same characters kept showing up on the other side of the table. And you know, I'm a slow learner, but after a while I thought to myself, wow, the same characters keep showing up to these negotiations. Whether I'm talking to Liberty Mutual or Partners Healthcare, it's always the same people. Then I started to notice that there was these people each had a distinct style. And I began to learn that there's only a relatively small number of negotiating styles. And then I learned that the most effective thing you can do as a negotiator is to learn those styles, understand them, and then learn how to adapt. Which is this other quote that I use, which is from the military, which is so apropos to negotiation. Improvise, adapt, and overcome. That's exactly what you're doing when you're negotiating, right? You're improvising, you're adapting, and maybe you're not trying to overcome, but you're trying to drive a solution that you walk away from the negotiation you feel good about. So, as I went along, to help my own development as a negotiator, I decided to give these styles that I was seeing names. So as I go through these styles and their names, think about people you've negotiated with and see if they don't fit one of these styles. Sometimes they'll fit a couple styles. And think about yourself and see if you don't fit one of these styles. The first I call the skeptic. This is a very common style, and I'll explain to you what it looks like when you experience it. The aggressor. Very common style. Unfortunately common. It's probably the predominant style, and many people seem to believe this is the only way to negotiate. In fact, I'm willing to bet there's aggressors sitting in this audience acting like nice people right now. And we all know you're going to turn into a monster when you start negotiating, right? Very, very common style. The litigator. I'll explain to you what that means. Very common. The statistician. Remember that. You'll hear me say several times, if you want to be a successful negotiator, that's the style you want to learn to emulate. It's the most effective style. There are other names, other negotiating experts give it other names, but in general, that is the most effective negotiating style. One of my least favorite styles, the apologist. Unfortunately common. I don't really care for this style, but it's common. In my last one, I don't give it a very nice name, the corporate sloth. That's not a very kind name. I probably should change that name. So let's look at each of these styles quickly, and I'll try to explain what they are. So, the skeptic. When you're sitting down with a skeptical style negotiator, these are some of the things you're going to see. They want to create leverage by running you down. They're instantly going to start, questioning, everything. How committed are you to doing business with them? How good is your pricing? Can they trust you? You have service quality problems. On and on and on. They're very, very skeptical about everything. I was once negotiating with a large, powerful bank, global bank. Big contract, probably worth $15 million a year, 5-year renewal, $75, $80 million in value. That's a big contract, at least for us. And so it was me, by myself, negotiating with 6 or 7 really smart corporate bankers. Very early in that negotiation, what did I start to hear? Well, you know what, Alan? We know you are offering better pricing to small customers than you give to us. We just know. And we're not signing this thing until you prove to us that that's not true. Very skeptical approach. And they kept emphasizing that theme over and over again. So when you see this style, how can you effectively adapt to it? Improvise, adapt, and overcome. Easy to say, can be hard to do. First thing is you don't buy in. You don't buy in. When you start getting that vibe, that strong skepticism, where they're trying to undermine you and put you on defensive, you've got to think about it consciously. Do not buy into it. You've got to believe in what you do. That's before you start negotiating. You've got to believe in what you're doing. You've got to believe in your stance. Own the issues, and by which I mean, if you had problems in the relationship, whether it's business or personal, you've got to own your part of it. You can't hide that. You can't try to talk your way around it. You've got to own it. Because by owning it, you're going to move some of that leverage back to your side of the table. Okay? You have to have facts that will deflect their skepticism. Let's use this bank again as an example. So, as I said, these bankers are sitting there with me, probably second negotiation session, and I heard that, well, you know what, we know you're giving better pricing to small customers. We just know it. We're one of your largest customers in the world. How can that be? You better change that, Alan. So when they rolled that out, I said, well, actually that's true. And they were stunned. They said, what? What did you say? I said, yeah, that's actually true. And they said, well, how could that be? We're probably your largest account in the Northeast. And I said, well, we have grown through acquisition. And oh, by the way, I think your bank has grown through acquisition too, have you not? And when you acquire small banks, what do you acquire? Existing relationships, contracts, pricing. Isn't it the case that you would acquire contracts where the pricing didn't make any market sense? Well, the same with us. We're not running around the city offering low prices to small customers. We've acquired contracts where the previous owner gave inappropriate pricing to small customers trying to build their business. But what we do is we correct those as time goes on. We normalize that pricing. However, then to drive the point home, remember I said with a skeptic, you have to have the facts at your command. I had prepared a market analysis for them, and I showed them their peers without showing them names. I showed them a spreadsheet of their peers with all the key pricing metrics, and I said, look what a good job you've done negotiating on behalf of this bank. You have an excellent pricing program. I was able to renew that contract for 5 years. No problem at all. So, you know, in closing a deal with these people, like I said, own those issues. If they're focused on pricing, understand the pricing of your own business. Understand your own position. If the market's shifting, you as a negotiator for your firm or yourself need to know that. Watch out for what I call landmines. That bank, when you think about what they were trying to do, you know what they were trying to get? Is what we all know as a most favored nations clause, that no matter who you're doing business with, the bank, always has the lowest price in the market. I hated those clauses because I didn't think they were fair, and I always resisted those. But if there was already one in an existing agreement, you would be in trouble. Just do your homework, be prepared, hard facts, not conjecture, no defensiveness. Stand up, believe in what you're doing, and you'll do quite well with a skeptic. The aggressor. Like I said, a lot of people seem to think this is the only way to negotiate. I don't know where they learned that, but it's extremely common. And their characteristics are just what you see here. They threaten you. Verbal attacks. Sometimes they're profane. You know, sometimes they can be quite vulgar in a business negotiation.
Are there any politicians like this?
No, I haven't seen any. I once had I was negotiating with one of Boston's largest law firms. So picture this, 30th floor of a beautiful building in the financial district. Conference room, marble and mahogany. Sweeping views of Boston Harbor out the window. Mr. Wheelock is sitting there innocently at this big conference table by himself, waiting for the executive director to come in to start a contract renewal negotiation. All of a sudden, the door to the conference room swings open. She slams the door, and she comes striding right up to me and she says, Mr. Wheelock, I demand to know why you've been hosing this firm for the last 5 years.
Oh.
It was a great opening for the negotiation. And she didn't actually say hosing either. It was a really, really tough cookie. And a very smart, capable business person. So when you see this style, How can you effectively adapt to it? And the cool thing about this, from your own career development perspective, is if you can learn to comfortably deal with this, you're progressing in your career. There's no doubt about it. Seriously. So, again, easy to say, hard to do. First thing, don't try not to be intimidated. And again, part of that can be just a mental preparation of going in to meet with a person like that, whether it's personal or business. You have to get yourself in the mindset like, I know what's going to happen here. I'm prepared for it. I'm going to stand up for myself. One of the smartest things you can do with the aggressor is to figure out where are they going to go. What are their hot buttons? What are they going to be all, why are they going to be angry? What specifically are they going to come after me about? And if you can forecast that, you're in a much stronger position to deal with it. Because once you forecasted that, then you prepare to refute those hot button issues one by one. Okay? And aggressors really respond well to the win-win concept. So, when this executive director came barreling into the room and, basically attacked me, I wasn't surprised. I've known her for years. I knew she was capable of something like that. And so one of the first things I said when she sat down finally is I said, you know what, Jane, I analyzed your account. Here's one of the things I noticed. It's a big law firm. We've got 300 attorneys here. You know what these characters are doing? They're calling in so-called emergency deliveries to Iron Mountain all day long. They need something, they call up. Back at Iron Mountain, we're scrambling, we're getting trucks, we have to get courier services, people are running into the record center, getting the files, delivering it to you. Hugely expensive. It's so expensive, it's 25% of what you spend with my company every year. How about this? I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to put you on a schedule. From 7 in the morning to 6 at night, we'll come here every other hour. These lawyers will never have to call in an emergency delivery again. It'll cut your costs dramatically, and it saves me money in my operation. She loved it, and I was able to renew that contract. So, you have to maintain, with these people, you have to maintain a firm, unruffled, consistent posture. If they get to you, if they put you on the defensive, have you ever experienced this? If you're defensive, again, whether it's personal or business, that's a really tough thing to recover from. Once a smart negotiator sees that you're on the defensive, you can expect to be pushed all the way back. You do not want that to happen. This piece of advice with these folks is so important. With an aggressor, if you know you're going in to talk to an aggressor, say to yourself, I'm going to take control of the meeting right out of the chute. Now with Jane, I didn't have time to take control. But in most cases, if I knew I had an aggressive negotiator, I would go in, I'd put the agenda in front of them, and I'd say, okay, let's address the first issue. I know you're worried about pricing. Bang, bang, boom. Before they can build up the steam, I'm already kind of taking control of the meeting. That is extremely effective in dealing with this type of negotiator. You have to thoroughly understand what are the implications, what's going to happen if you fail. If you're negotiating with an aggressive person, what's going to happen if you fail? You have to be ready. You have to know your bottom line. You have to be ready to walk away. Because this style, until you finally squeal and you say, you know what, that's it, you pushed me too far, you can keep this business, I don't want it. They interpret that as, hey, I did my job. They gave up. That's their real bottom line. That's how they think about it. Again, probably not a great strategy on their part, because even if you agree to it, you're probably not going to be happy with them as a business partner going forward. The litigator. The people in the room know who this is. Those of you who don't, that's Perry Mason. He was on TV like 50 years ago. He was a lawyer, a famous lawyer, Perry Mason. But the litigator style, they're a style of negotiator that just focuses on terms and conditions. They're usually lawyers. And they've never met a clause they didn't like. And they love to talk about limitations of liability, indemnification, confidentiality clauses, you know, how much insurance do you have? What type of insurance do you have? Very heavy emphasis on risk and liability. They're trying to protect their side from risk and liability. So when you see this style, how can you effectively adapt to it? Easy. I personally think business contracts, no offense to people who are attorneys or deal in business, has to be one of the most boring things in the world. It's tedious. But if you want to negotiate effectively with a litigator style, you have to know it. You have to learn it. It's not rocket science. You can learn it. The language is dense. It can be complex. It's hard to understand. That's designed that way. But if you read a clause in a contract enough times and break down that sentence, you will understand it. You'll understand what they're trying to get you to sign off on, and you'll understand whether it represents something acceptable to you or not acceptable to you. So to deal with these folks effectively, you've got to know the legalese. Things to key on here is when you're faced with a litigator, don't even begin until you have done your homework. They will run you ragged. If you go into a negotiation like that and you're not prepared, they will run you right off a rail. I've seen it happen. Once you've negotiated with a litigator, you know how when we negotiate these days, it's electronic and people use, you know, the redlining technology and Word and some of the other systems. Well, those things go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. All kinds of changes are made. I have seen business people make fatal mistakes because they kept a, quote, clean copy. They sign it, and there was something in there they didn't realize was in there. Don't ever sign a, quote, clean copy until you've read it and made sure that everything you negotiated is still in there. Many times, if it's not in there, people didn't do it on purpose. It's just this stuff goes back and forth so often that it gets mixed up. If it's a really tough, contentious things like at Iron Mountain, a major negotiating sticking point was limitation of liability. Because people would say to me, well, if you lose an insurance policy that belongs to a billionaire, and we need that policy, and you guys can't find it, by God, you're going to pay for that. And we would say, yeah, we will, $1 a box. And I spent many hours negotiating that very thing. People say, that's insane. How that can't be. And the most effective way I had to finally educate the customer and explain why we were so resistant to that, I would say, well, it would be like you going to CVS and saying, you messed up my family pictures, and therefore I'm going to sue you for, you know, $10 million because those were irreplaceable pictures. They don't have control. I mean, think of all the aspects of something like that they had no control over. Same thing for us at Iron Mountain. We didn't have control over so many aspects of the lifespan of that document. So we said, yeah, we'll accept liability, but only to a very low level. So when you are dealing with a litigator, you have to think about these really contentious or potentially contentious clauses and make sure you make your decision before you sit down. Many times if you're negotiating with someone, they're going to ask you for a very high limitation of liability. You should know how far you're willing to go before you even start. The statistician. As I said, if you want to be a sound, solid, professional negotiator, this is the style right here. Look at the characteristics. These people are well prepared, they know exactly what they want, they research the market. Every time I ever went in to negotiate with a statistician-style negotiator, you know what they would have? They'd always do the same thing. Right there on the desk, right where I could see it, competitive quotes. I'd look down, I'd see the logos of, companies that I knew were competing against us. And typically, they wouldn't even say anything. They're just sending a message. You see this, Alan? I've done my research. I hope you're prepared because we have competitive quotes. These folks just do such a good job. They know what they want. They know what the market pricing is. Their whole demeanor is their professional, firm thing. They're kind of a pleasure to deal with. And as I said, I think that they are the most effective style. How do you adapt to that? That's the easiest one of all. Take a page from their book. I used to say to my teams at Iron Mountain, my managers who were doing work like this, if you go into a negotiation with a statistician as well prepared as they are or better prepared, you're going to have a great productive negotiation. You really will. So, details on dealing with them, always assume the competition has been there. Oh, sorry. Be precise. Statisticians do not like dealing with sloppy negotiators. Just think about it. It's not their style. If you're sloppy and they're organized, you're going to have a conflict right out of the gate. So emulate their style. Document the process. Always be on time. Always document everything. Dot the I's, cross the T's. They respond to it beautifully. They really do. This is the best type of business or even personal negotiation. If it's a business negotiation, I always say when you're working with a statistician, don't just sign up for a year. Try to get a multi-year agreement. You both work so hard, capitalize it. Get what you deserve out of it. The apologist. These people invoke what I've always called the mysterious they. Have you ever heard this all your life? People say, usually it's kids. Oh, why'd you do that? Oh, that's because they told me to do that. Who told you to do that? Well, they. A lot of employees will say, oh yeah, Alan, we didn't do that because that's what they wanted. Who's they? There's always this mysterious they, and whenever I heard that in business, I would say, there is no they. They is us. We're all in this together. Do not try to blame this on some mysterious they person, okay? We all have to take responsibility. But when you are dealing with an apologist, you'll see things like, oh gosh, I wish I could help you guys. We love you guys. This thing's out of my hands. I'm just doing what I'm told. Have you ever heard this? This is a frustrating style of negotiating to deal with, and the truth is, when you see this, you're not really dealing with the decision maker. You're not. So how do you improvise, adapt, and overcome when you see the apologist? First step is figure out who's actually making the decision here. Who's pulling this person's strings? Who's telling them what to do? And try to figure out how you get to that person. Again, this is where you can really deploy your wonderful interpersonal skills here when you deal with the apologist, because you need to get around them. You need to get the decision maker, right? But in your effort to get around them, you're very likely to either scare them, make them angry, make them resentful. A lot of bad things can happen, but not if you're skillful. So try not to negotiate until the decision maker is engaged. The best tactic is get the decision maker in the room. Not with the apologist gone, that'll really threaten them. Get their boss or the decision maker in the room with, all of you together. And then, as I say, be persuasive, be reassuring, and give the apologist some cover. Maybe they've done a good job managing the relationship. They're not a decision maker, but maybe the day-to-day they're doing a good job, right? Give them credit for that. Calm them down, reassure them. Tell them you're trying to get the work done and you need that decision maker there so that you can negotiate face to face. If you can do that, you'll pull this off. Worst case scenario, this happened to me a couple times with these folks, you just have to do it. You just go to the decision maker and say, you know what, I'm trying to get this done. The person that we're working with clearly doesn't have the decision-making authority. Can you help us out? That's bad, because then you probably created an enemy for your company. You don't want to do that. The corporate sloth. It's getting better now, but for the last 5 years, this style became increasingly common. Why? In my opinion, the reason why this became so common is because companies cut back so much that many people were doing the work of 2 or 3 people. And since they were doing the work of 2 or 3 people, they just couldn't get anything done. These folks, their characteristics are exactly as you see here. They don't seem to get anything done. They're slow, they're evasive. You set a meeting, they cancel the meeting. You set a meeting, they don't show up. You set a negotiation by phone, you can hear them typing in the background. They're not even paying any attention to you. Okay? It's a horrible, horrible style to deal with. How do you adapt to this? This is a strange one. This is where you, even though you're in the subservient position, right? You're the vendor, let's say. You actually pick up some of their work. You do the market research. You drive the process. You hold them accountable, even though they're supposed to be holding you accountable. It's the only way you can get this type of negotiation off the dime. A good way to deal with them, set up a calendar, like an Outlook calendar or something. Hold them to it. Remind them, yeah, we got a session coming up tomorrow. Make sure you're there. You missed the last one. Make sure you don't miss this one. Do the market research for them. Show them. Give them spreadsheets. Give them a little presentation. Show them, here's what, here's what the market bears for our services right now. Here's what I'm offering you. Compares favorably, doesn't it? Make them comfortable that if they sign a new agreement with you, that they don't have to worry about it coming back on them. Okay? The strange thing that I've noticed about this type of negotiator, you know how they usually react when you start driving it? You take the process away from them and you start driving it? They act relieved. It's so strange, but they typically do. They'll say, oh, good, you're going to do this because I don't have time. So those are the styles, and those are the adaptations. And you notice there's not that many styles. And as I said when I started, you will see these styles over and over and over again. I'm sure you are, as we went through this, I'm sure you were, images of people are popping into your head, right? That you know who emulate these styles. So, whether it's a personal or a business negotiation, what's good look like? When you finish the process, how do you know you've done a good job? Here's what I say are the characteristics of a successful negotiation. Throughout the whole thing, you should never have gotten defensive. With practice, I predict you seldom will get defensive. If you don't negotiate a lot, you may get defensive a lot. But the more you do it, the less defensive you'll be. It's practice. It's a skill, just like anything else. Always tell the truth. I have friends in business, when they hear this, they say to me, tell the truth? What are you talking about, Alan? We never tell the truth. customers, this is employees, you don't tell the truth to people. I do not agree with that. I am 180 degrees the other way. I think you always tell the truth, even if it's painful. Even if you're taking ownership for stuff you wish hadn't happened, you are so much better off in your brand name and your company or your family, whatever it is, you're so much better off if you own up to it and tell the truth. As I said over and over again, be the statistician. If you're going to really negotiate, you take it seriously, and you want to do a good job for yourself or your employer, prepare. Always know your bottom line. Some of the biggest mistakes I've seen in negotiation are people who made major decisions sitting there under pressure. Don't do that. Think it all through. Think to yourself, okay, if they bring me all the way down to here, that's where I'm going to stop. And if it goes beyond that, I'm going to walk away. Don't agree to things that are unfair to you or your employer. Again, easy to say, hard to do. The last few years, a lot of us accepted things that we didn't want to because we needed the revenue. Hopefully that's starting to dissipate now, but try to avoid those things. Strive for agreements that all parties can feel good about. That's called win-win, not win-lose negotiation. Good negotiation strengthens relationships between people. It doesn't alienate people from one another. Trust and respect. Strive for what I call trust and respect. One of my favorite clients of all time, I won't give you the name, but it was a very well-known name, huge global bank. And this bank was in Boston, and this bank was such a good customer. Every year they grew 10 or 15%. Any product we asked them to look at, they'd look at. Their way of dealing with me and my employees and my company was professional, firm, and fair. They were an absolute delight. They were such a delight that one spring I said to my Iron Mountain team, I said, you know what, let's take the bank out for a cruise. They said, what do you mean a cruise? I said, let's take them out on Boston Harbor, one of those big boats that goes around for a sunset cruise. And basically, let's say, thanks for your business and thanks for being a great customer. So we did. We got the boat, rented the boat. Huge bunch of my employees, huge bunch of the bank's employees. We're up there, cruising around, beautiful June evening, sun setting, everybody's got their wine and their little hors d'oeuvres. So I was doing what I always do, I was walking around the boat, chatting everybody up, and I happened to glance out of my corner of my eye, and I see the entire senior management team of this big bank sitting there at a table together, which they should not have been doing. They should have been dispersed and talking to their employees, but they were all sitting together. And so as I'm going by, I get one of these, hey, Alan, can you come over here, please? I sort of walked over, I said, sure. I said, what did I do wrong now, guys? And they said, well, we have some feedback for you. I said, great, I'm always happy to get feedback. What is it? They said, well, we've been talking about you, and we've decided this. You are the kind of manager that can tell us to go to hell, and we all walk away smiling. And I said, you know what, guys, that's one of the best compliments I ever got in my career. But the reason I close with that is because think about what that bank was actually trying to say to me. What they were really trying to say is, look, Alan, we've worked with you and your team. We've negotiated with you and your team. We have learned to trust and respect you, and we can sense that you trust and respect us. Isn't that great? So that's, I think, what we all should strive for. So, any questions? Yes?
First of all, I'm glad you had the quote about improvise, adapt, and overcome. I always thought it was from a Clint Eastwood movie. Because he uses that.
It is, yes.
Not the Marines. So,
Yeah. Goes
basically an introvert, and I'm lucky enough to be on both sides of the table because I rent the theater, so I have to negotiate a contract that way, but I also buy shows, so I have to negotiate from the other side. But I always feel as if it's hard to come from a position of strength because of, I think just because of my personality.
Yes.
I always think the other side has the upper hand, even when I know it's not true. Now, through practice and time, I've learned basically to overcome it, but I still face that all the time. And when I do a negotiation and there's very little negotiation and somebody says, oh, that sounds great, I think, oh my gosh, I should have charged them more.
Yeah, exactly right, and you're probably right. So, that's a great question, and I think what you're describing, you describe yourself as an introvert, but you certainly just spoke in front of 25 people with no problem. But I think that what you just described captures the way a lot of people feel about negotiation. A lot of people feel about negotiation the same way they feel about public speaking. They don't want to do it. They find it intimidating, they don't like conflict, they like things to be easy and smooth, and they don't want to be stressed out and worked up. So I believe that the way you've already handled it is, maybe for a lot of us, we'd be talking to a therapist on the side, but you have to be your own little profile of courage. You have to step up to it. You have to think about it. As I've said here several times today, the more you prepare, the more confident you'll be in these negotiations. And it sounds as though you've already done that. So I think you kind of answered your own question. I think what you are doing is exactly what you should be doing. You jumped into it, you did the best you could with it, and you're getting better and better at it. So congratulations. It's good. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, the first question is, where were you 25 years ago when I was negotiating fees with my client?
I'm here now.
Yeah, but I'm not in business
Oh,
anymore.
sorry.
It's really an excellent presentation, very good. And the question I really have is, do you happen to writing someplace where you can sell it?
I do. I don't sell it. I give it away, believe it or not. This has been published in a regional magazine recently. But what I do is, a lot of people will say to me, can I get a copy of this? And it's kind of bulky, and there's a lot of material here. So what I did is I created a really simple summary. It's like a one-page or two-page sheet that shows all the styles and the adaptations. And I'm happy to send that to anyone. Just give me your card and I'll send it to you, probably within the next 24 to 48 hours.
We also have Len today taping the presentation for our ACMI and for our YouTube channel. So that will be posted once it's reviewed in maybe 2 weeks, I guess.
Yeah.
A week and a half.
Any other questions? Yes.
Short of going out and doing this on a day-to-day basis, I mean, I don't do it all the time, I do it some of the time. How would you recommend someone practice this before they're actually in front of a client?
Well, I've actually done that, where if you have either a family member or a trusted employee or a trusted colleague, and it's a particularly important negotiation, practice with that trusted advisor, if you will. Let them, try, just as I've tried to explain here today, think about where's this thing going to go, what are the hot button issues going to be. I've even had people at Iron Mountain, if I was responsible, like I once had to renegotiate with General Electric, that was a lot of pressure. That was a huge account down at Fairfield, Connecticut, which they're now leaving and coming up here. But I knew where they were going to go, so I would get some of my managers in the office and I'd say, okay, you be GE so-and-so, you be GE so-and-so. Let's go through these issues and just throw me an objection. And they would throw it at me, and if I stumbled, it was great because they said, man, Alan, you really messed that up. Don't do that when you get down there. A lot of benefits from that. One is, if you're in a leadership role, the people who are working for you really respond. They love the fact that the boss is asking their input on an important decision. I mean, that's so important in leadership roles that we try to pull people in and make them feel as though they're making a contribution to important aspects of the business like this. So you have to practice. If it's really a substantive negotiation, I would not want to go into a big negotiation without having had some practice. It's very important. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Interesting that you talked about we're always negotiating, putting our personal lives with family members and so on. Was it different negotiating with family members? I mean, is there a time when you would say, well, for the long run, the best thing in this situation is just to give it? You know, it's gonna, that's going to be better.
Well, in family, particularly, I'm glad my wife isn't here to hear this, but particularly within your family, to negotiate with people who know you intimately. They know all the skeletons, they know everything about you. You know, as I've said, negotiation is not a war, but leverage is important. And you as a negotiator create leverage when you're well prepared, you've done your research, you know your position, you believe in what you do, all the things that I've said today. But in a family negotiation, many times you're going, if it's a difficult issue, you can be on the defensive right out of the gate because the other person has all the leverage, particularly if you're wrong. And according to my wife, I'm pretty much always wrong. So, one of my favorite New Yorker cartoons in the last year was a husband and wife somewhere down in New York City, and the husband saying to the wife, "What can I do wrong for you next?" I showed that to my wife. I said, "You see that? I'm not the only one." Yes.
As a holistic health coach, one of the things that I've struggled with is putting a price on my value. And so what I've learned over time is that I have to respect the fact that I've gone to school for that experience, that I've been coaching for 6 years. And you know, sometimes to quote someone an hourly rate isn't beneficial because if I'm giving a price for a talk, I've had to do research, I might have food prep involved, shopping, all of that. So now I just have a flat rate. And I say what that includes.
That's great.
So, but it's been something that I've had to learn, painfully learn over time.
So many of the things that you learn in either personal or professional negotiation, you learn the hard way.
Yes.
I mean, I made some hair-raising mistakes. If I had any hair to raise at Iron Mountain, I mean, I vividly remember, and again, I won't name this company, but it was a very large mutual fund company. And huge account. And, you know, an account executive was running it with me. I was the executive sponsor. And she came running up to me in the office one day and she said, "Alan, guess what? So-and-so's taking us to lunch." And I said, "What?" She said, "They're taking us to lunch. We always take them to lunch." But they said, "No, we'll take you to lunch." And I said, "Did you ever see The Godfather?" Do you remember the restaurant scene when Michael went to the bathroom and what happened when he came back? That's the kind of lunch we're going to. We're going to get shot today. We're going to get terminated. She said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "This company doesn't take vendors to lunch." And sure enough, we went to lunch, they terminated us. The reason I learned the hard way about negotiation, once the move-out process began, they resurrected the contract, which was one of the very first ones I ever negotiated with Iron Mountain in my career. And I had left a gaping hole in the agreement that allowed that company to leave Iron Mountain at about 1/4 of the cost that it should have taken to get them out. even the CEO passing me in the hallway says, that wasn't really a very good piece of negotiation there, Alan. And, but it was done. I had signed, they said, Alan, is that your signature on this? And I said, that's my signature. So you learn, to become a better personal or business negotiator, you make a lot of mistakes. But that's okay. That's how you learn. Any other questions or comments? Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to all of you.